Hey guys, Pedro here to tell you about the latest from Metalite Expedition 1, out January 19th on AFM Records. The album has 16 songs, 68 minutes in length, and this is the band's fourth full-length studio album. They are a Swedish melodic power metal band. The design of this record is intricately connected with the concept behind it. A concept that brings this sci-fi story happening on Earth in year 2055. Understanding that concept allows you to better come to grips with a record that has 16 songs in 68 minutes, but tries to be as engaging, as entertaining as possible, so that the listener can stay connected not only with the story, but with the experience from the first all the way to the last track. I can tell you that the design is very dynamic, definitely offering you the right ebbs and flows, and with the right cliffhangers in order for you to feel like you're not just listening to a story, but you're rather part of the story itself. And that is an important attribute behind any concept record, but I feel more so specifically this one. When it comes to the sound of the album, that sci-fi theme behind the concept obviously has to come through in the sound in order for the overall experience to be complete. And I felt like they did that by having the synthesizers become such a big part of the overall sound, of the overall dynamics of this record. It's impossible to go from song to song and not see the impact that they're having, either by creating a melodic ambiance in the background of the songs, or by really being the driver, the force behind the tracks themselves. Having this dynamic and allowing that one single element that is so predominant on every single track move slightly from the front to the back and from the back to the front definitely adds more dynamics to the record and definitely makes the sound feel a little bit more richer, giving a little bit more depth to it and not necessarily giving a very linear output, song in and song out, which across 16 songs in 68 minutes would become perhaps a little bit redundant. So I love the sound of the keyboards, but more so the energy that they have and the movement that they give from track to track. Outside of that overly, I'm not going to say symphonic, but overly melodic, electronic, synthesizer-driven sound, this is still a power metal band with power metal sound. So I'm glad to see that the drums and guitars still had enough strength to really push through or power through that heavy synth wave that surrounds this album. Perhaps the guitars a lot more than the drums. And the guitar sound on this record is really good. It's not necessarily overpowering, but it has its fingerprint, it has its DNA, and it leaves this mark on every single track. Either be through really creative solos, either be through being a little bit more heavier, a little bit more thicker, pushing that guitar and drum sound a little bit more into the forefront, allowing the synthesizers to be something that is not necessarily pushed back, but lesser part of the overall experience. A little bit more of an atmospheric melodic element, if you will. But even when those synths are in the forefront, the guitars are still part of the overall wall of sound. So they're always there, but they have quite a bit of movement. But more importantly, they have a lot of quality to them. And you're going to see that quality throughout the record, like I said, either be in the melodies, either be in the solos, and how they take the lead, and how they're a little bit thicker, and how they're a little bit bigger. So the guitars have definitely a lot of life and a lot of energy. And that allows to create a counterbalance with that synthesizer sound in order to make the sound a little bit more rich, giving it a little bit more depth, and not allowing this record to lose the power in power metal and just be an overly melodic metal record. Now the drums don't have that same impact. I didn't feel like the drums had that same force. The drums were a little bit subjugated to a secondary role in the overall big picture of the sound on this record. It's definitely about the synths, it's definitely about the guitars, but the drums don't have an opportunity to flex a little bit. They don't have the opportunity to have a little bit more room to breathe and feel the power of the drums a little bit more strongly in the forefront. You can see how they are giving more volume when the guitars become a little bit heavier, when the sound becomes a little bit more pungent. You can feel the drums and you can hear their impact, but it's never really over the top, and they don't have a sense of explosion on any given track of this record. They're there in order to complement the experience. They're there in order to give the sound a more mature experience, but they're never there really to break through and perhaps feel slightly more thunderous and slightly more powerful, and I think there was room in some tracks for that to happen. Vocally, the album is super powerful. First of all, I really enjoy the more layered and textured, using backing vocals, different layers to the vocals, because the overall vocal performance, sometimes it really needed. It needed that extra volume, it needed that extra thickness. It's not there naturally, so by adding layers to it, you're still keeping things moving in a very linear way. You're still keeping things moving with a very similar output, but now you're increasing the overall substance that's coming at the listener. Instead of having just one arrow pointed at you, you have multiples. And I think that makes the record feel a little bit more powerful vocally. It gives more strength to the album. It adds strength to the power metal side of the band. The delivery, the tonality, the range, that gives quality to the melodic side of the band. Super incredible performance from start to finish. This is not an easy record to be a vocalist in, specifically because the concept aspect of it. I like the fact that they also had it almost like samples, using the vocals in order to become part of the story or to better tell the story, becoming the character, coming through in a different way with a more electronic sound, adding to that overall sci-fi feel that the story has and that the overall album has, giving also more dynamic movement to the overall vocal performance. So vocally, this is a very strong album, an album that really pushes the record forward. It gives it a lot more quality, and it gives quality to the individual songs, and the tonality is really rich. So I honestly enjoy this record tremendously from a vocal standpoint, because it felt very warm, very connected, but still sometimes slightly robotic, which matches that sci-fi feel. So it's a really interesting performance. I think they felt that they could tweak certain things by adding those layers in order to make the vocals match the story and kind of put the vocals into that time period, but at the same time not losing the DNA of that vocal performance and not losing all the great warm characteristics that that vocal tone really has and has had over previous records and now coming into this one. So great job knowing exactly what to do in order to match where they wanted the story to go and how the vocals could help from that point of view, but not completely taking away the strength and the DNA of the singer at the exact same time. When you look at this whole record, you have to say that the album has great sound, great presence, great design, great songs, great vocals. I just feel like the record is a little bit too long, and that could become cumbersome. More so for those that are discovering the band through this record, or they're not necessarily hardcore fans of the band. I understand that the concept drives the album, and sometimes you have to go a little bit further in order for you to finish the concept, in order for you to finish your ideas. So I get that, but 16 tracks, 68 minutes on a concept record, it's not an easy album to digest, at least not for the rookies coming in that are not necessarily, like I said, fans of the band or familiar with the band or even enjoying concept records. So this is an album that you can still digest it on a piece by piece because the songs have their individual quality, but it's really designed to be heard from start to finish. And when you have this length, when you have this amount of songs, you have to find ways of making things perhaps a little bit more compact so that the playability of the overall record increases. Hard to finish this album and feel like you need to go back to it again. It's like watching a 3-hour movie. I don't care how good it is, you're not necessarily going to press play and watch it right back again. So this album has a little bit of that downside considering all the great qualities that it holds. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I had to pick this track because who hasn't pressed CtrIAltDel? Who hasn't? So a song with that title immediately caught my attention, and I like the super electronic driven sound that the track has, even infusing a little bit of a robotic sense to a certain degree, very computerized, if you will, with great drums and guitars together, the drums perhaps a little bit behind the guitars, but giving the right foundation for the guitars to push themselves forward, with the synths coming over the top. Vocally super strong performance on the melodic side of the track and on the more powerful side of the track, so having a great range that really balances out the song, having a lot more layers behind those vocals and the chorus, which makes the chorus more memorable, more more punchy. It makes the chorus feel also bigger, creating more volume behind it, matching the sound that is also carrying that same chorus. Really cool guitar solo, and that's something you're going to find throughout the entire album. Really good guitar solos that always add quality to the songs. They always add energy, they always add momentum, they always add great melody, so they feel like they are the right piece in order to ignite the track at the right time. And this one is a perfect example of that. A super big sounding synth driven power metal track all around. Next we have Outer Worlds. The drums and guitars have more strength together in the song than the electronic elements, than the synths. A complete change from CtrIAltDel, where I felt like overall the song was really electronic and really overpowered by that electronic sound. And this track, I felt like they still use that electronic sound, but they allowed that to be a little bit behind of the drums and guitars, and those two elements created the depth and the volume, and they were the main ingredients of how this song moves from start to finish. It has power, it has a sense of ignition, it's a song that has a lot of drive, vocally more melodic, with a great chorus once again, but really great tonality, super melodic, and the vocals emphasize the more melodic side of this track, specifically being important when the guitars and drums have more of a main role musically. So there's a little bit of a counterbalance where you're losing melodically by not having the synths overtake the song, you're gaining by having the vocals do that instead. So it's a nice little change of elements in order to still create the same sort of DNA that you're going to find throughout the record. Last but definitely not least, Free. Once again, a very synth driven song, but a song that has this almost ballad-like feel. If Disney was to do a sci-fi movie with a princess, I honestly feel like this track would be perfectly, because it has a lot of different qualities. It feels like a ballad at times, it feels like a Disney movie soundtrack, it still feels like a sci-fi track, and it still has a lot of power and super melodic. So it has all of these different characteristics that they found a way of merging them all together in this song and still make it work. It has a great guitar solo. One of my favorites on the album is on this track. It's a song that just feels like it goes in different places. It has different momentums. It has different elements of different DNAs, but the sequence and how it moves from one to the other is seamless. It has great mobility. The vocals really help with that. Really layered and textured vocals. I mean, something you're going to notice throughout the whole record, like I mentioned before, having that depth in vocals by having different layers, creating volume, creating depth. That's something that it's there. It's part of the DNA of this album. But I don't think it becomes as noticeable as it does on this song. This was the track that opened my eyes to it from a different angle, from a different perspective. I kind of notice it throughout, but this song allows you to see it better. Maybe because of the overall DNA of the sound behind it, kind of lets the vocals breathe a little bit more, and that element, that part of that depth becomes a little bit more noticeable. But it definitely showcases a different side, and it allows you to see the overall vocals of the record from a different perspective. So once you go through this song, your perception will change, and the next time you go through the record, you're going to see different things vocally that you just didn't catch the first time around. So really important song from that standpoint. This is it, Metalite with Expedition 1, out January 19 on AFM Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.